What do you need to do in order to make it to National Master in 2024? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you my first game of 2024 over the board, of course, classical game. But ultimately, I'm going to tell you what I think is that you need to study, what you need to do to make it to National Master. Why? Well, I'm not talking about International Master, I'm not talking about Grandmaster because I haven't made it there. But National Master, I got the title in 20, well, like 7 years ago. And recently, like 2 years ago, I decided to play more tournaments. I got destroyed over and over. I lost a lot of points, a lot of rating points over the board. But then recently, I got it back. I went from 21 ish that I went down to, and I'm at 2240 something little by little. For the last three, four tournaments, I've been scoring really well. So I really want to share with you what I think is that you need to know. What is the knowledge that you need to have? How do you get it? And so on. So let's start with this game. First round, I'm playing a 2025 rated player, 97% accuracy. So I think it's reason to brag about it. I showed you another game that I played in this same tournament against a grandmaster, and we both had 98% accuracy. Yes, I know. It. I still don't believe it. But anyways, let's go to the beginning of this game. And of course, this is one of the main changes that I've made for the last 2 years. I changed my opening for white. Um, one of you, Vasil, that you asked me, hey, why don't you play this anymore online? Well, I'm playing it as my main weapon on tournaments, and I don't want people to really get familiar with my lines, right? So all I can tell you is if you look at my records on the games that I've played, everything is available, is public records. You can see that I've only been playing this, and I think I have only lost one game with it. Now, I'm not telling you play this opening. All I'm telling you is find an opening that, for me, what's worked is an opening that is a system. So you don't have to memorize specific move orders, specific strings of moves. You just need to know where the pieces go. You need to know the typical plans, and that is easy to implement as well. Now, I'm playing the Birds opening. It also gives me something that was key in my game, which is the main reason why I was getting destroyed. I was always low on time, and when you're low on time, it doesn't matter who you're playing against. You're gonna make silly mistakes. So when I started to play this system, every single time I play it, people spend a few minutes to understand how do I go about this. Because I don't care what opening book you find, what chessable course you find, no one teaches you how to play against f4. They just don't. So they have to start thinking, okay, what do I play? Then you have the psychological factor there that if you lose, not only do you lose, but you lose to a guy who played f4, which is an opening that, again, I like, but I know it has a bad reputation. And the other thing about it is that since I played so much, I already know the plans depending on what the black pieces do. So I'm always in my elements. Every game that I've played with it, my opponents are down. I'm ahead on the clock by 20, 30, sometimes even 40 minutes. After G6 in this game, I do my setup. And if you really pay attention to it, this is like playing the King's Indian defense or the Pier's defense or the King's Indian attack, but my F pawn is on F4 instead of being on F2. Like imagine that pawn on F2. You're gonna see you get that same setup. And in many cases, in the King's Indian defense, the Pier's defense, we move this pawn, we move this knight out the way so that we can play F4, and then we put it back, right? So in my mind, I'm sort of like one move ahead. Also, if you're familiar with the Dutch defense, this is a Dutch defense, Leningrad variation. So you're playing systems that are sound. You just maybe they're not the best way to fight for an advantage as white, and that's why people don't like it that much. But just know before I carry on that you could play the Birch opening like this, or you could play it like classical variation with b3, bishop b2 is another option. And it's also the Dutch, color reversed, but classical variation of the Dutch. So anyways, in my game, my opponent chooses to play c5. It only makes sense to control the center. Almost every game I get when I play this over the board, a huge percentage of them, I faced this setup. Why? It's very natural, but also um, if you have any knowledge about the Dutch defense, you know that this is the main setup against the Dutch defense. So people playing it as black, but the point is, I get it a lot. Now, after c5, I decided to play queen e1. Sometimes you could play c3. I decided to play queen e1 just to get e4 and then just play chess, right? I just want to get a game of chess. My opponent plays d4, and then automatically this triggers a pattern that we know in the King's Indian defense. When they push the pawn, automatically c4 becomes available. So I want my knight to land on c4. Now, many people like to play knight a3 and knight c4. I've played it myself. But here I said, you know what? I know you're going to want to kick me out with the b pawn. So let me play a4 first, and then my knight is going to land on c4. So queen c7, I went knight a3, not so much to get to b5, but to simply land on c4. My opponent goes a6, then bishop d2, completing development. And after knight c6, I decided to do something that we talk about a lot in my chessable course, counter blow. We talk about it on YouTube here in our lessons, which is I really wanted to challenge their central pawn. I want to trade it for one of my side pawns, right? So after c3, I got bishop e6, and now the only piece that is doing nothing that I haven't moved, my rook, comes over to the c file. That's it. Simple chess. By now, my opponent, who is a 2000 rated player, he knows what he's doing, but I know for a fact he has probably never played this position before. He's not in his elements. He needs to play chess, and he decides to do something very logical. I want to get my queen off the same file as the rook. So he goes queen b6, and I quickly open up the file for my rook. He takes back, and now you could pause the video for a moment, think how you'd continue, but only one thing makes sense, especially if you have been following this channel step by step. At this point, I'm going to look at my pawn chain in the center to see how I should continue. My pawn chain in the center is aiming at the queen side. Even this pawn chain is aiming at the queen side. Even my bishops are aiming at the queen side. Let me do this right. There we go, right? So this tells me I should be playing on the queen side. I should be expanding there. And that's why I just played pawn to b4. Now, by now, my opponent tells me after the game, we talked and he was like, look, when you played before, I already felt like I was lost. And I told him at the moment, I hadn't reviewed the game. I told him, look, I don't think you were lost, but it was definitely easier to play for the white pieces. Again, it's a very weird position, and we're just playing chess, right? So after b4, we got bishop d5. Now, my knight wanted to get to c4 in the first place, so I go knight to c4. And then the main question for you is, after they take and he took, how would you take back? Would you take with the pawn, or would you take with the rook? When I first played knight c4, I was set to take with the rook because it looks really nice. It's a very nice rook on an open file. I defend this pawn, I put pressure on this pawn. But the truth is, it wasn't so clear how to continue, right? What's my follow-up? However, I took a moment to visualize this, and I didn't even have to ask myself. I just knew the plan was very simple. Push those pawns, you get the initiative, you gain space, and a potential passed pawn. So I took knight to e4, then c5. By the way, don't even worry about, I did consider it, but don't worry about d3 because we have c5, right? It blocks the check and it gains a tempo on the queen. So knight e4, then pawn to c5, queen c7, pawn to b5, and all of this is pretty forcing. They took, fine, give me the knight, and then after knight a5 is another key moment in the game. What you're going to see from this moment on is something that I have learned. I think, I don't want to say I learned it recently, but I finally made it. I mastered it. I don't want to say mastered it, but it's something that I really started to pay more attention to, and I really started to use it to implement it more consciously in my games. And that is understanding that many times it's about maintaining your position. If you have a good position, like in my case, I felt that was the case. All I wanted to do was maintain it and little by little improve it, right? So just take it from here. I feel like I'm better because I got all of this space with the pawns, active pieces. So I wanted to convert that into something just a little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger. But the main element is I know my opponent is uncomfortable. If I flip the board, if I look at it from black's perspective, it has to be uncomfortable. So all I wanted to do was, this is your threat. Well, I'm going to take that away from you and maintain my pressure. That was it. The computer likes the move, but in my mind, all I'm thinking is there's no more fork. I'm being consistent with my queen side expansion. Look at my pawns, look at my bishop looking that way. And now it is your turn. So I'm passing the turn to you. What are you going to do about it? My opponent is not easy to make a move. My opponent decides to play pawn to b6. Now, I didn't think he would play it that soon. And when he played it, and in my mind I'm thinking if he ever plays it, I'm going to go pawn to c6. And actually the computer loves that move. And how can you not? It's a protected pass pawn. It's an asset forever. This knight has nowhere to go. This has to be very, very easy to play for white. However, again, I took a moment and I changed my mind. The move that I ended up playing was actually knight to e5. I'm thinking it comes with a tempo on that rook. If you take my knight, I get the rook. If you move the rook, let's say to b8 or to e8, I don't know, I'm going to take, hitting you with the rook as well. And then I have this fork on d7. So I'm happy with this, right? In the game, my opponent actually plays rook d8. That way, my knight doesn't have the d7 square. But then this is actually the part of the game, the moment of the game where I felt the most proud. I found a move that the computer thinks is the best move. And I did it. When I did it, I didn't think it was actually one of the top moves, but I really liked what I was getting out of it. Feel free to post a video as long as you like. The move that I actually played was knight to d3. And all I was thinking was, after I play knight d3, my knight is better than their knight. My queen is better than their queen. My bishop is better. Look at that bishop. Is better than this bishop. And of course, I still have these pawns over here, right? I could play c6. I could take whatever I want. But all I was thinking was that maintain my position strong. My opponent has to be already feeling very uncomfortable. He's going to feel the need to do something drastic to change this. And something that crossed my mind was, if you see this in a book, in a chess book, the evaluation is going to be is better for white. And I can see myself easily continuing for another 10, 20 moves from this position. It's very easy to play. For my opponent, not so much. So in other words, I didn't want to risk anything. I didn't want to go knight c6, complicate anything to give my opponent counterplay. No. Knight d3, simple enough. I don't have to think too much. Now I pass the turn to you. What are you going to do? Well, my opponent played b takes e5, rook takes e5, and after queen b6, what is the move that made my opponent resign? Take your time if you like. Pretty straightforward. The move is actually rook a1, and the thing is, I'm taking your knight. Your rook cannot come over and defend. And after the knight leaves, you could pick either rook is going to be trapping the queen. The queen just cannot go anywhere. I thought when I play rook a1, well, maybe he goes queen e6, and then when I take, there's some checks and so on, but there's just nothing. There's just not enough for them to complicate the game. So there you have it. This is the game itself. I was impressed to see that it was 97% accuracy, but at the end of the day, it was just the opening. I know it really well. And then following the pawn structure, the plan was pretty straightforward as well. And my opponent gave me a break as well. Now, this was the first round. I actually did really well. I didn't lose any games in this 6-round tournament. You saw already, I went up like 40-something points. And finally, I feel like I'm in my elements. Now, maybe the next tournament I get destroyed, but if after 3-4 tournaments doing really well, scoring 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 6, I feel like what I'm doing is working, and I'm going to continue doing that. Now, If you ask me, what is it that we need to do to get to National Master? The only knowledge I have, and it's a little bit weird because I'm promoting my own YouTube channel, but all the knowledge I have, guys, is from three books that I learned. They're only in Spanish. Those three books, I got the content from those books, not the specific examples, but the order in which the material is presented. And that's what you have on my YouTube channel, step by step. These books were one about strategy, one about tactics, one about pawn formation. And that's what we've been talking about in the YouTube channel, lesson by lesson, numbered step by step. The only knowledge I have in my head is that, plus, of course, doing tactics, doing some puzzle rush, doing some tactics on any website you like, just daily things. But then there are two other things that I added, the three other things that I added recently in the last 2 years that are really working out for me. Number one, I changed the opening. So I'm playing F4. Don't play it. Just find something that you like, that is a system, that is easy to implement. The other one is, one problem I was having besides the time pressure was I was having difficulties visualizing, calculating, right? So the best thing that I found was, number one, I have a book, I've shown it to you before, with exercises about mates in one, mates in two, all the way through mates in nine, I think. And I said, well, I'm gonna start working on mates in eight and just put it on the board, calculate mates in eight. Many times I don't get it all, but I'm calculating and visualizing. And if I just get really good at visualizing, calculating 5, 6 moves, not eight, but 5, 6, that's going to help me out. So that's one thing I added. And the other thing is the book. I have it here, actually, not even planned. There's this book. I've mentioned it to you many times. I even made a video on it. It's a book by Grandmaster Boris Gulko. And basically, what I like about the book, and I'll tell you what it is about, that way you understand, it's not this book. You don't have to get this book, but a book that helps you with this. But basically, Golko is going through his games, top grandmaster games, and he's getting to key positions, and he's asking his student, I think co-author, that his student, he's asking, okay, in this position, let's find a way to create the initiative. Let's calculate this variation. And then that's what I needed. I needed something realistic, something that looks like what I'm going to get in my tournament games, so that it will make me calculate. So I'm doing that. When Gulko says, key position, calculate, I calculate. And I'm calculating 6, 8, 10, 12 move, different variations. And even if I'm off, like his student in the book, I calculated and I visualized. And man, that has helped a lot. So everything you have on the YouTube channel, plus tactics, plus the Gulko books, plus playing games, plus having your openings under control. There's the Chessable course. There's the YouTube lessons as well that I've put out there. And that's that. I also made a video on how I'm using Chessable for it, and that's something I forgot to say. I started to use Chessable a lot, and it's made a difference for me. It's more fun for me too, and more efficient too. But I think the efficiency comes in part from the fact that it's easier for me to review my opening lines. Instead of being on chess.com or Lichess, like move, 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 here I'm actually moving the pieces, and I could do it in between things. I really look forward to it. And these weird openings that I'm playing, or offbeat openings, I know them really well because of that, right? So there you go. I think I talked a lot, like always, but I hope you found some value in the game and in this overall reminder, because I've told you the same thing over and over. So if you haven't, feel free to join us with following a training plan. Every week I post the material for that week. We're going to be doing it until May. Let me know in the comments your username, chess.com username. That way I can add you if you want to. And let's see where we are in May.